Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Govinda Radhe. Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Radha Mohan, Jai Gurudev. On Gurudev's instructions and by his mercy, we will continue today our study of the Manah Sisksa, the teachings for the mind, and we'll read also today some Chaitanya Charitamrita. The lessons for the mind, the teaching for the mind is a prayer by Raghunath Das Goswami with a commentary by Anantadas Babaji Maharaj and many others, as we've seen. Anantadas is citing many other acharyas and many other beautiful texts in the course of his own commentary. Manah Siksha means, of course, teachings for the mind, and from the very beginning we've meditated on what a strange thing that is to say, what a sweet paradox that is to talk to one's mind. In the case of Raghunath Das Goswami, to make a prayer to one's own mind, and then say nice things to one's mind, and then again invite that nice mind to think about certain things. So what we first notice, and what's come back again, is that the mind is a friend, that the mind is something we have a relationship to, and that the mind is in this itself in the relation with soul and consciousness. In Bhakti, we talk about perceptions in two ways, don't we? As material, we have material perceptions with material senses, and then we talk about spiritual perceptions, which are enjoyed by spiritual perceptions. And as long as we're in a living form, as long as we are jivas, the mind is involved. Some way the mind is the bridge between thought and perception. And then again, the bridge between mind and soul is consciousness. So perception is material, sometimes spiritual, but thought is subtle. Thought is a subtle energy. This means that it will not survive the disappearance of our body. The soul is eternal, the spiritual experience is eternal, but what happens in our thoughts and what happens in our material perceptions, this will disappear. And the space we live in when we're doing our spiritual practice is this space between mind and soul. Spiritual practice is many things. One thing it is trying to purify our mind, to make our consciousness more filled with spiritual experience and less filled with material experience. So it's always a question of consciousness, it's always a matter of consciousness, but it's a matter of whether our consciousness is more material or more spiritual. And in a way, doing bhajan is little more than purifying the mind, because when we purify the mind, the soul becomes open to us. When we purify the mind of the material attachments that burden it, the negative thinking that fills it, then the path to our soul becomes open to us. Purifying the mind means moving toward the soul, becoming more familiar with our spiritual identity, becoming more intimate with our svarup, our spiritual form, the form of our spiritual body. So a full purification of the mind would mean that we're fully present in our svarup. We still have a mind, but it is no longer dirtied by material attachments. As long as we live in a body, as long as we're jiva, we have a mind, but we can come to a point in our practice where the mind is so clear of material attachments that we have full awareness, full consciousness of our soul. We're in our Svarup, as we call that. Well, what are these processes we use to purify the mind? Well, we all know them more or less, and they're all more or less challenging to all of us. The first one I already said is that we let go of the material attachments, our attachments to the material things in our lives. And this happens not by somehow letting go with our mental hands, but rather realizing that what our material attachments are in the end not real. When we realize that they don't belong to our soul, when we realize that we were not born with them and we will not die with them, then they simply become air to us. Then they simply dissolve into the air. Once we simply ask ourselves, what did we come into this world with? And what will we leave this world, this material world with? The answer is soul. And everything that came along with it will not endure, is not real. Another way of purifying the mind is by cultivating the garden of our spiritual qualities. So focusing on moments of spiritual experience, focusing on moments of feeling, focusing on moments of
recording in progress,
focusing on moments of beauty. Another technique we use is to fix on Krishna, fix on God, fix our attention on the name, on the form, on the pastimes of God. This too cleanses our mind. We do chanting. We listen to Harikatha. We practice one-pointedness. And above all, we try to surrender. By that we mean let go of our egoistic attachment to being the masters of our own lives. So that's the way the mind works. But the other part of the title of this sweet prayer by Raghunath Das Goswami is the teachings, the Sisksa. So let's ask, what is a lesson? What is a Sisksa? What does it mean to teach? What does it mean to learn? This is a question for all the school teachers in our family. Because we go to school to learn, don't we? For many, many years of our life. Many years. We go to school to learn, we listen to our teacher, we listen to the lessons. We go home, we do our homework, we try to remember the lesson. We go back to school and we take a test. Then we forget the lesson, then we remember the lesson, then we forget the lesson. These are all the mental activities of learning. But Raghunath Das is reaching for something else when he's talking about the lessons to the mind. He's inviting the mind, his own mind, and by that he's inviting us to invite our minds to learn spiritually, to learn spiritual lessons. And this means to learn to love, to learn to love. And this is the greatest paradox of all paradoxes, because we cannot learn to love, and yet that is the one thing that we must do. We cannot be taught how to feel for something, for someone. We can't be taught like a teacher teaches the social studies lesson in the school. We can only learn to love by mercy. That is, by feeling, accepting the feeling of another lover in our life, any other lover. To love we learn by example. The very first example in our life is our mother. Then there are others, their fathers and siblings and friends. And then we come to know a more purified love through Guru. And we understand that Guru's love is coming from a higher love. And we understand that that love is coming from still a higher love. And we begin to open ourselves up to the reality that all the love that we need comes not from books and school lessons, but rather from opening the gates to our souls, opening the gate to our hearts, and letting it exercise, letting the heart do its thing. The function of the soul is to love. So in a way, in the most profound way, we don't need to teach the soul to love. And yet we must work very hard to let the soul love the way it wants to. Because from the very moment we enjoy that immediate love with the mother, where the soul of the child and the soul of the mother is communicating perfect love, almost like it's love going through the umbilical cord. From that moment on, we learn all the reasons why we shouldn't love. We're put into society where love is not the norm, and where everything else but love is required of us in order to get along, in order for us to survive. So in this very first teaching, you remember from a few weeks ago, the very first teaching of Manah Sisksa, Raghunath Das Goswami invited us to learn to love. And then he provided a list of the things we should learn to love. And they were Guru, Vrindavan, other devotees, the Brahmanas, the mantra, the holy name, and finally, but not lastly, the Radha Mohan, the loving couple. But when he says learn to love, oh dear mind, learn to love, he's not talking about go home and read the book about these things. He's saying learn to unlearn your blockages to loving. You already know how to love. Nobody needs to learn how to love. We're all top experts on loving. What we need to undo is our years and years of covering that perfect skill that we have, that everyone has, covering it with different costumes, different behaviors, different ideas, all of which we need in order to get along in society, at least a certain society, but which prevent us from being ourselves natural lovers, natural servants of love, natural manjaris. So the last time we had just finished the second teaching, and the second teaching had two sweet messages. I'll remind you. The first one was, don't worry about religious teachings. Only worship Radha and Mohan. Don't be concerned about the rules about what to do or the rules about what not to do. Don't be concerned about the people who say there are no rules. Stay away from all these arguments. Open your heart to Radha and Mohan. Open your heart to worshipping Radha and Mohan. And this led us to a long meditation on what it means to worship and how Radha and Mohan reinvented the idea of worship for us. And then the second message in that second teaching was, know that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna. But it was formulated in a very special way, remember. Know that Krishna and the son of the mother, the son of Sachi, are the same. So, know that Krishna and the son of the mother of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are the same. He put it in such a way so that we're reminded that Krishna is the son of someone, the son of a mother. And that was about the time, speaking of school class, that was the time I gave you homework assignment, everybody, that you would spend 1 hour of the day looking around you and remembering that every person you see is the son of a mother. The kind ones, the beautiful ones, the ugly ones, the happy ones and unhappy ones, the killers and the violent ones, they all had their diapers changed by a mother one time. They were all fed tenderly with a spoon in the mouth by a mother at one time. So they're all coming from an intimate relation of love, which maybe was led to a life of love, and maybe it was violently interrupted and led to a life of disruption and unhappiness and lack of clarity. But everyone everyone you see had her diaper changed by a mother, her dirty diaper changed by a mother, with tenderness, with care, with love. So that led us to a meditation on what it is, what the relation between Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. And we talked about the guru relationship for some time, that the relationship between guru and devotee is one of care, one of friendship, not one of power. But the main story last week was that Chaitanya is Krishna. But Krishna, who has gone through a very special kind of experience and forms a very special kind of divinity. And that's why we'll continue today with one verse of Chaitanya Charitamrita, a verse from the second chapter of the Adi Lila. So it's 2 chapters before the Adi Lila 4 that we read on Thursdays, but it's quite different. The chapter is called Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is where there's a very clear and simple verse I'll read for you. But more importantly, there's an explanation by Srila Prabhupada of what makes Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Krishna in a way that was never the case before. That there's something very unique about Chaitanya, and he tries to explain it for us. So in order to understand this lesson to the mind about how Krishna is Chaitanya, it will be helpful to understand what is special about Chaitanya and why for thousands of years we talked about Krishna in the Vedic literature without talking about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and what he is made of. For those of you not following the Thursday class, then Chaitanya Charitamrita, this long and wonderful spiritual biography of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's written by Krishnadas Kaviraj, who's an associate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's about the same age lived at about the same time as Raghunath Das Goswami, the author of the Manah. So they're happening about the same time. They're written at about the same time, but they're quite different in their character. And the other thing that's quite different in the character is that the commentator of Manah, our beloved Anantadas Babaji, is also quite different from Srila Prabhupada, the commentator of Chaitanya Charitamrita and Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and other works. Srila Prabhupada appears about 30 years before Anantadas Babaji. Anantadas Babaji left the body only 5 years ago, it seems to me, 5 or 6. And of course, Prabhupada was mostly interested in his life and his teaching, particularly after he went to America, to teach about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to reveal to the world what he reveals in the text we're going to read today, namely the special qualities of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what makes him a revolution in spiritual life. And Anantadas Babaji is much more focused on the experience of Raganuga Bhakti, of devotional service, and about the Leelas of Radha and Mohan, as we know, and the very specific way that Bhakti is experienced and lived out. So they're quite different in their approach, but of course they're related also. One more word for you that haven't been to the Thursday class. The Adi Lila is one of 3 parts of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's the beginning part, it's the first of the 3, and it's explaining essentially why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appears, what he does in the first years of his life, and, like we're going to see today, the very special qualities that he has. So we'll just read one verse. It's verse 5 from chapter 2 of Adi Lila. And I'll read just Prabhupada's translation of the verse. What the Upanishads describe as the impersonal Brahman is but the effulgence of his body, and the Lord known as the Supersoul is but his localized plenary portion. Lord Chaitanya is the supreme personality of Godhead, Krishna himself, full with 6 opulences. He is the absolute truth, and no other truth is greater than or equal to him. So I'll repeat it, but you can see already that the verse first refers to the Upanishads. I'll come back to that in a minute. So it's referring to a point of beginning that is very old. Remember that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in the 15th century, about the time of the European Renaissance, but the Upanishads, who are describing some of the qualities of God, are from 1,000 years before the Common Era. But more importantly, the verse talks about 3 parts of absolute truth. Brahman, the impersonal Brahman, I'll explain, the Supersoul, or the Paramatma, and Supreme Personality of Godhead. So now let me repeat it, then we'll go on to the explanation by Prabhupada. What the Upanishads describe as the impersonal Brahman is but the effulgence of his body. His is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The verse is saying what the Upanishads call Brahman is the effulgence, the glow, the fiery, bright light that comes from his body, the effulgence. That's the Brahman. We continue. And the Lord known as the Supersoul is but his localized plenary portion. So we have the Brahman, that's one part of Chaitanya, and then we have Supersoul, which is where his soul appears locally in individual jivas. I'll explain again in more detail in a moment. And then finally, thirdly, and most importantly, the verse says, Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan, Krishna himself, full with 6 opulences. He is the absolute truth, and no other truth is greater than or equal to him. So absolute truth is not God as Brahman, absolute truth is not God as Supersoul, Paramatma, absolute truth is not God as even as personality of Godhead, but all of these together, all of these make up the being of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all of these make up the message that he brought to us, and all of these make up the appearance of the Vrindavan Leela in his spiritual consciousness. I'll try to come back to all these bits along the way. Now comes the explanation from Prabhupada of this verse. And he does something very nice in his explanation. He explains these 3 aspects of God, these 3 qualities of God, as 3 parts of the evolution of spiritual consciousness. We have one aspect of God, then we have a second aspect of God, and the highest form of spiritual consciousness comes with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Prabhupada says this, he says, the compilers of the Upanishads speak very highly of the impersonal Brahman. Remember that the Upanishads, this is a kind of condensation of the Vedas. It's the greatest hits of the Vedas. It's the most important ideas of the Vedas put down into, they say there are 108 Upanishads, but many of them are lost. And like I said, these are written 1,000 years before the common era, before the time of Jesus, as we say in Europe. So around the time of when Bhagavad Gita started to be written down, about 500 years after the Vedas, and so on. So very old is the point. These writings come from oral traditions. They're spoken and sung, so it's very hard to know when they start. That's not the important part. The important part is that Brahman is the first step for Prabhupada in the evolution of the idea that God is absolute truth, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is absolute truth. Prabhupada says now, the Upanishads, which are considered the most elevated portion of the Vedic literatures, are meant for persons who desire to get free from material association and who therefore approach a bona fide spiritual master for enlightenment. So if you want to just get away from material attachments, then you can worship Brahman. Brahman means God as reality itself. If you worship Brahman, you will understand that you are a soul and that God is this world around us. That's what Prabhupada is saying. So a very low level of spirituality, you can have that if you worship Brahman only. And without simplifying too much, this is essentially what you have in Buddhism. That God is everything, which is to say nothing. That there's no soul, that there's no, certainly no devotion, but that if we surrender to God as Brahman, we empty ourselves and we detach from all material attachments, and we are then merged with Brahman, we are merged with everything, the reality itself, which is God. Prabhupada suspects that there's something very special happening in the Upanishads. He says, yes, this is the origin of Brahman, and we're going to advance beyond that in time. But he also says something very special now, I'll read for you, about the Upanishads, which can make us think that he is finding the seed of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu already in the Upanishads. Here's what he says. The prefix, so the first letters, the prefix upa indicates that one must receive knowledge about the absolute truth from a spiritual master. So Prabhupada only starts with this idea. It's very, very sweet. He's looking at the three parts of the word Upanishad. Upa, Ni, and Shad. And he says, well, look, Upa means that you have to get knowledge about the Absolute from a guru, from a bona fide spiritual master. Upa means, literally in Sanskrit, coming close, coming near. Upa means intimacy, friendship, care, love. Upa means coming close to something real through relation, coming close to teacher or guru. That's Upa. Then Ni, Upanishad, the Ni means something like bowing down. Or, sorry, not bowing down, but the bottom, the foundation, the rocks, the stones at the bottom, something firm and solid, something deep and profound and subtle. And then Sad, Upanishad, means to sit. So in other words, what Prabhupada is getting at, he doesn't explain very much, but what he's saying silently, is that Upanishad means to sit at the feet of Guru in an intimate position and receive knowledge about the absolute truth. To receive a foundation, a solid, stable knowledge, and to receive it through intimacy. This is what Upanishad means. So Prabhupada explains now further, one who has faith in his spiritual master, actually receives transcendental instruction. And as his attachment for material life slackens, means weakened, he is able to advance on the spiritual path. Faith, that's the word. Faith is the opening. Faith opens the door to the spiritual path. Faith is the first step as well it's an early step in bhakti. It's not the first step, but it's early step in bhakti as well. But Prabhupada is saying here in general, to receive instruction about absolute truth, we must first have faith. Not in absolute truth, but in Guru. Faith is a strange and remarkable thing, because faith is a relation to the unknown. Faith is a relation to what we don't know. It's a relation to something we actually cannot know. And strangely, it's a kind of knowledge. It's knowledge about what we cannot know. If I have faith in Guru, I know something, but I don't know what it is. I know something that the Guru has. I see something, I feel something, there's a presence of something, and I don't know what it is. So faith is a kind of knowledge without knowledge. It's magic knowledge. Sorry, bit of a childish word, but it's magic knowledge, it's mystical knowledge. But most important, it's a relationship between me and the one I have faith in, the Guru. It's a relationship between me and what I don't know, and the Guru who has something that I don't know either. So it's all about this relation between not knowing something and not knowing something. But the relationship is there, and the relationship is real, and the relationship I feel. There is a me, and I don't know, and there's a Guru, and I don't know what he or she knows, but between us is a relationship of faith. And it's in that place between the two souls that spiritual progress happens. It's even better, now I'm going to say something silly, it's even better if you don't understand what Guru is saying. You can relish your faith in the fact that he's saying something important. You can take pleasure knowing that someday, somehow, you will realize what he's saying, but that what really is pleasing and what really is lifting you and carrying you on your spiritual path is the faith itself. So please, Guru, don't tell me facts that I can understand and then we're finished. Tell me mysteries so that I can relish our relationship, so I can feel the warmth and the softness of the relationship between us, and exist in the belief that you love me and you are giving me something that's real. Because once I know it's a fact, then that relationship of faith is gone. Then it's just a relationship of fact. So in material science, of course, in the West, if a scientist asks you, well, how do you know that? And you say, well, I have faith, you'll be laughed at. You'll be ridiculed. But if only the scientists knew the richness and depth of a kind of relationship you can have with someone only if you have faith. Think of the poor scientist who goes to bed every night knowing everything, with no mystery in his heart, no faith in anything. This is the life of a robot. This is not the life for us. So this faith that Prabhupada is talking about is so very important. And it's most important because it's a relation. It's not a fact, it's not an ego, it's not even one soul, it's a relation between two souls. It's a relation between what's invisible and what's visible, what's invisible and what's visible. And so spiritual practice is something like walking along that path of faith and cultivating that faith inside me. Not accumulating facts like, well, it's 15 kilometers to Mathura, or the temperature is 32 degrees in Vrindavan, and then I'm getting smarter and smarter because now I know two things that I didn't know before. But rather, learning about the world is learning that the material world doesn't exist. Learning about the world means letting it dissolve into nothing but soul and the faith in the things that you cannot understand yet, that you cannot know. Spiritual practice is navigating the material world and letting it dissolve away around your eyes because it's fact and because it has no juice, no depth, no richness. It's not contradicting facts. It's not saying this world in the sort of Christian, evangelical Christian way. It's not saying this world is false, this world is evil, this world is full of sin. No. Spiritual practice is walking through the world and watching the reality of what you think is real dissolving away, like sand that blows away in the wind. So I want to know what the temperature is in Japan, and I ask Ramani, what's the temperature? And she says, well, it's 10 degrees in Tokyo. And in the West, I would say, well, yes, I have faith in Ramani, but I think I'll wait for the weather report and then I'll know for sure it's 10 degrees. Yes, my faith turned into fact. But in spiritual consciousness, faith becomes realization. The question you had disappears. Spiritual practice is not answering the question like, what is the temperature in Tokyo? It's watching the question completely disappear. Faith is about mystery. And mystery, that's another important term for Prabhupada. What is mystery? What is mystical? Mystical is something we have faith in which gives us feeling. A mystical experience is an experience of the unknown which carries with it emotion, which carries with it the energy of feeling, somehow awakens in us emotion, and awakens our heart, awakens our soul, by the very experience of not knowing it. This is what mystic experience is. Okay, let's continue. Prabhupada says, still talking about the Upanishads, knowledge of the transcendental science of the Upanishads can free one from the entanglement of existence in the material world. And when thus liberated, one can be elevated to the spiritual kingdom of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by advancement in spiritual life. I'll repeat, there are two parts here. There are two things happening. First of all, we can become liberated from material world if we focus on the Upanishads. Knowledge of the transcendental science of the Upanishads can free one from the entanglement of existence in the material world. This is the experience of the Buddhist. The Buddhist is free from the entanglements of the material world. There's no question. He or she is liberated. Good. That's part one. And now part two says, but if you like that and you want to go farther, then stay on the voyage with me, he says. When thus liberated, one can be elevated to the spiritual kingdom of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by advancement in spiritual life. So he's saying, first step, detach from the material constraints. This can happen by experience of Brahman, of God as just the entirety of reality around us. But then from that platform, you can go further, namely by realizing Paramatma, and then by realizing Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. So there's transcendence from material consciousness, and Prabhupada said this happens through the Upanishad, the closeness to a teacher, closeness with associates, through emotion, through heart, through soul, by realization. Again, the reason that Brahman realization is helpful is because it can help us to get over this idea that the world is facts. So a Buddhist, like us, doesn't think that the world is full of facts. The Buddhist thinks that reality is everything that exists. And it's not facts, it's entirely God. It's the divine. And so Prabhupada says, from that platform we can continue our voyage towards the absolute truth, which is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that was first step, Brahman. And now we move on to Paramatma. Although actually, Prabhupada's going to, I stay with Prabhupada, who's going to say a little bit more about Brahman and then go to Paramatma. The beginning of spiritual enlightenment is realization of impersonal Brahman. So God is everything that exists. Stop. Such realization is affected by gradual negation of material variegatedness. So when we start to recognize the unity of existence, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of a Buddhist. The Buddhist who reaches enlightenment, he stops seeing the details of the world and starts seeing increasingly the oneness of the world, and that everything is ultimately God. The meaning of creation is oneness. There's no variation in this oneness. It's the same oneness everywhere. The world is made of sameness. It's perfect, it's harmonious, and it's completely one-dimensional. Prabhupada says, impersonal Brahman realization is the partial, distant experience of the absolute truth that one achieves through the rational approach. So he's saying basically the Buddhist takes one step towards absolute truth, but this realization is partial, it's incomplete, and absolute truth is still very, very far away. And we can't get it. The last thing he says is we cannot get there through the rational approach. He continues, Prabhupada, it is compared to one's seeing a hill from a distance and taking it to be a smoky cloud. A hill is not a smoky cloud, but it appears to be one from a distance because of our imperfect vision. In imperfect or smoky realization of the absolute truth, spiritual variegatedness is conspicuous by its absence. It's a very nice example that Prabhupada gives. So the Buddhist, or the one who's in impersonal Brahman, looks at the world, it sees a hill far away, and the hill has details, it has texture, maybe it has plants on it, maybe it has water flowing, but from far away it seems very, very smoky. No detail, no texture, no flavor, no color, etc. And this is because we have imperfect vision. Imperfect vision in the spiritual sense, of course. From far away, the hill just looks like a blob. That's what the Brahman conception of the absolute truth is. If we're to go up close, it would be detailed. But we're looking from a distance with our imperfect vision. This experience, says Prabhupada, is therefore called Advaita Vada, or realization of the oneness of the Absolute. Vada is, of course, knowledge. Advaita means non-dual, means knowledge of the one. Advaita Vada, knowledge of the one. The world is one thing. There's no texture, there's no shade, there's no color, there's no variation, and of course, in all of that, there's no feeling. Again, I don't want to be critical of the Buddhists, but this is more or less the Buddhist conception of the divine. And then he returns to this idea of effulgence, of the glow, the golden yellow light of Brahman that comes from the body of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which we read about in Chaitanya Charitamrita and elsewhere. And it's a comparison that Prabhupada makes in many of his books between God as the sun and God as the sun rays. In the Brahman conception of the divine, God, who is the sun, is felt because of the rays. And all the rays are the same color, golden, yellow, same heat, same texture, so on and so forth. We feel the presence of the divine when we feel the rays, but the divine is far away and we see none of its beauty, none of its texture. And this is very nice because it's compared to Lord Chaitanya himself, Gaura, the effulgence of Gaura, the effulgence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is the Brahman aspect of Chaitanya. He has a golden shine, just like the sun. He is God the sun, and his warmth and light can be felt at a distance. So one of the three parts of the nature of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is this effulgence, which is, unless we go closer, in both our understanding of the soul and in our understanding of the feelings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, unless we go closer, we stay there with just this feeling of the presence of God and nothing else. Yes, God is there, but we don't know him, we have no relationship to him, and so on. So Prabhupada says, the impersonal glowing effulgence of Brahman consists only of the personal bodily rays of the Supreme Godhead, Shri Krishna. Since Shri Gaurasundra, or Lord Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is identical with Shri Krishna himself, the Brahman effulgence consists of the rays of his transcendental body. So the world is touched by these rays when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is there, but there's no intimacy, no feeling. And also importantly, we come to that now, the idea that the soul of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the soul of Radha Mohan, is also sleeping in our own hearts. Now, finally, Prabhupada goes over to Paramatma, the second aspect of the three aspects. I remind you, Brahman, the impersonal reality, one aspect of God. Second is Paramatma, the supersoul. And third is Bhagwan, the personality. So about Paramatma, Prabhupada says this. Similarly, the supersoul, which is called Paramatma, is a plenary representation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Brahman is a representation of God, and Paramatma is another representation of God, Supersoul. It represents all of God. Part of the Supersoul is everywhere. Part of the Supersoul is in everyone. We are all part and parcel of God. Radha Mohan is in us. The Vrindavan Leela is in us. This is all consequence of Paramatma. That God is both independent and completely present in our hearts. Our souls are all parts of God's soul. Everything that is God's soul is in our soul. They have the same qualities, but not the same quantity. This is the very, very strong idea of Paramatma. Paramatma means that the soul of God is in everyone. In a way, it's a shared soul. The divine is present in everyone. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is present in everyone. Radha Mohan, again, is present in the soul of everyone. And this is what Prabhupada now says. The Antaryami, the super soul, actually the Antaryami, he explains, I'm sorry. The super soul is in everyone's heart, he says. It's the controller of all living entities. So Antar means inside and Yami means the controller. So Antaryami is the controller in everyone's heart. And then he cites Bhagavad Gita just to prove this. Bhagavad Gita 15:15. He says this is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita where Lord Krishna says, Sarvasya chaham ridi sanivishtaha. I am situated in everyone's heart. I am situated in everyone's heart. So Paramatma means that Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is situated in everyone's heart. Is present in every soul. Every Atma is a part of Paramatma. And then he gives another example from Bhagavad Gita, this time 5:29, which states, Bhuktaram Yagyatapsam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. And he translates it this way, He is the ultimate enjoyer, the Bhuktaram, of sacrifices and austerities. He is the Supreme Lord, the Maheshwaram of all worlds, the controller of the entire universe. And Prabhupada says this indicates that the Supreme Lord, acting in his expansion as the Supersoul, is the proprietor of everything. And he continues now, Prabhupada, with a quotation from the Brahma Samhita, the famous chapter 5. Adantara sta paramanu chayantarastam. So, does he translate it? Let's see. What is situated in the universe is situated in the smallest particle of every soul, the paramanu. So what is God is in everything. What is God is in everything. So Chaitanya, Lord Chaitanya is everywhere, in every speck of dust, in every heart. And now Prabhupada explains a little bit more at length. The Lord is present everywhere, within the heart of every living entity, and within each and every atom as well. Thus, by this supersoul feature, the Lord is all-pervading. Furthermore, Lord Chaitanya is also the master of all wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation, because he is Sri Krishna himself. He is described as Purna, or complete, total. And now comes a part where Prabhupada talks about Lord Chaitanya being the perfect sannyas. We'll read through it, but I'm not quite sure how to understand it. He says, in the feature of Lord Chaitanya, the Lord is an ideal renouncer, just as Sri Ram was an ideal king. Lord Chaitanya accepted the order of sannyas and exemplified exceedingly wonderful principles in his own life. No one can compare to him in the order of sannyas. Although in Kali Yuga acceptance of the sannyas order is generally forbidden, Lord Chaitanya accepted it because he is complete in renunciation. So in effect, it's not the sannyas subject that's so important to Prabhupada here. It's the fact that what Lord Chaitanya does, he does with completeness, with perfection. And since there was the institution of sannyas, then Chaitanya did it with perfection. He goes on, others can imitate him, but can only follow in his footsteps as far as possible. Those who are unfit for this order of life are strictly forbidden by the injunctions of the Shastras to accept it. Lord Chaitanya, however, is complete in renunciation as well as all other opulences. He is therefore the highest principle of the absolute truth. By the analytical study of the truth of Lord Chaitanya, one will find that he is not different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. No one is greater than or even equal to him. So now we reach at last the part we are waiting for, the part about how Chaitanya is not only Brahman, not only Paramatma, but what makes him the absolute truth is that he is those things together with the personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya is Krishna, but not the Krishna from before. It's a Krishna with a new thirst to deepen his knowledge, to experience new things. So now Prabhupada cites Bhagavad Gita again, chapter 7. Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, O conqueror of wealth, Arjuna, there is no truth superior to me. And Prabhupada then responds that here is confirmed that there is no truth higher than Lord Shri Krishna Chaitanya. But now to pull this all together and understand what absolute truth means, we have to ask, what can be understood by truth? Again, what kind of truth does Krishna mean when he says there's no truth higher than Krishna Chaitanya? Or Prabhupada says. What kind of truth are we talking about? We're not talking about book truth. We're not talking about fact and figures. We're not talking about how long the river Ganges is or how high the Mount Everest is. Krishna Chaitanya is not the truth about the facts. Well, what's he the truth of then? What's the absolute truth of? The absolute truth of experience. What is absolute experience? What is the greatest experience one can have? What is the greatest experience one can have? It's to surrender to the divine, to please the divine, to give oneself to the divine. And you know the story that the divine, the Krishna, can do everything he likes. All his desires are fulfilled. He's all knowledge, all beauty, all riches. But there's one thing he cannot do, and that is to experience how it is to love God, to experience himself, what it means to give love to God. That is the highest experience. That is the experience that he needs to have, and he does have. And what's more, it's the experience that he then shares with the devotees and invites his devotees to share it with him. The experience of causing bliss of God. That's the final bit in the puzzle of the absolute truth. So now Prabhupada summarizes kind of. He says, the impersonal Brahman is the goal of those who cultivate the study of books of transcendental knowledge. The super soul is the goal of those who perform the yoga practices. Very good. If you want Brahman, you read the books. You want super soul, you do the yoga. Very nice. However, one who knows the Supreme Personality of Godhead, says Prabhupada, surpasses realization of both Brahman and Paramatma, because Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, is the ultimate platform of absolute knowledge. And again, what is absolute knowledge? It's knowledge of what God experiences in his personality. In other words, when he loves. The personality of God himself is the personality that seeks to love God himself. A relationship that happens through prem at the very, very highest level. And now to finish his explanation, Prabhupada is going to go back to the Upanishads and to a very famous subject in the Upanishads that he'll now put together with the three aspects of God. He says, the personality of Godhead is the complete form of Sat Chid Ananda, full life, knowledge, and bliss. The personality of Godhead is the complete form, the totality of all these three things, Sat Chit Ananda, life or existence, knowledge or consciousness, if you like, and bliss, Ananda. This, in the Upanishads and many other places, is explained to be the nature of the universe. These three things, Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. Life, knowledge, bliss. So now Prabhupada finishes by going through each of them very quickly. He starts with Sat, which is full life, complete existence. He says, by realization of the Sat portion of the complete whole, that is Brahman, the unlimited existence, one realizes the impersonal Brahman aspect of the Lord. So if you realize Sat, this one of the three parts of the nature of the universe, then you understand Brahman, the Brahman aspect of the Lord. And then Chit. He says, by realization of the Chit portion of the complete whole, unlimited knowledge, one can realize the localized aspect of the Lord, the Paramatma. By localized aspect, he means that part of the Lord that is in each local soul, every soul, wherever it may be, locally speaking. And then finally, Ananda, Sat, Chit, Ananda. Prabhupada says, but neither of these partial realizations of the complete whole can help one realize Ananda, or complete bliss. Without such realization of Ananda, knowledge of the absolute truth is incomplete. So unless we understand the pleasure of God, the bliss of God, the bliss that God receives from those who love Him, and the bliss that is given to Him by Radha at the highest level of devotion, unless we understand that, unless we realize that, we understand nothing. So Sat, the Brahman aspect, takes us one step. Chit, the knowledge aspect, takes us another step. But nothing is possible unless we understand the love that is given by Radha and the bliss that is taken by Mohan. Then the knowledge of the absolute truth is complete. And Prabhupada concludes his little explanation here, and we will conclude with that too. This verse of the Chaitanya Charitamrita by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is confirmed by a parallel statement in the Tattva Sandarbha of Srila Jiva Goswami. In the 8th part of the Tattva Sandarbha, it is said that the absolute truth is sometimes approached as impersonal Brahman, which, although spiritual, is only partial representation of the absolute truth. Narayana, the predominating deity in Vaikuntha, is to be known as the expansion of Sri Krishna. Of course, we know this. But Sri Krishna is the supreme absolute truth, the object of the transcendental love of all living entities. So God is not this abstract, impersonal reality that's Brahman. God is not the abstract knowledge that is Paramatma. God is a being of transcendental love, eager to give that love from the position of Radha to the enjoyment of the beloved in the position of Mohan. So the key aspects of the personality of God in bhakti are all the different ways that happiness can be enjoyed through personal relations, and we know that in bhakti we have many forms of relations, many forms of devotion, many forms of love, deep and personal, familial, maternal, service, etc. There's personality by the qualities of God that we study and talk about in our readings about the Nikunj Lila. There's love and compassion and juice and beauty and wisdom. There are different forms that God takes. There are different pastimes, of course, that God is busy with. All of these things give us an idea, an experience of God as something with personality, with character, with varying emotions, with intensity, with different qualities, and which, in their highest level, converge on Ananda, bliss. That completes the explanation of Prabhupada of this verse 5 of chapter 2 of the Adi Lila. And instead of going on with something new, this would be a very nice place to stop and invite you to share or comment or question.
Surprising.
Surprising. Me too.
So, the absolute truth, he received the love.
That is absolute truth.
Surprise. And this is the really spiritual life. And this cannot come without realization, without mercy of guide to do what you say. Upanishad. But not aversion, any other place in impersonality. We practice mostly impersonal. We have to watch with our consciousness where we are and from where we have to move and what is the goal of our life. Wow, beautiful, great. I try to understand, but I never understand. So I don't touch in that second part. And you can prove so clearly and crystal clear how important to understand that. Afterwards, what a beautiful mercy he brings with his to give us. Which is the books I like it. This is never, nobody I see, never before I listen this particular share it today. How deep you bring. I know it's not easy for everyone to do so deep, but I was so much relishing I cannot.
Radhe Radhe Go